previous videos, we mentioned about conducting effective search and reviewing the literature in order to acquire findings and identify the missing links and challenge in the open problem. These so-called missing links and the challenge in the open problems are commonly known as the research gap. It was mentioned that we will have to continuously loop the process, and in order to prevent bias, there will be quite a number of literature being reviewed, and comparisons are made between the literature so that we are able to gain a bigger picture of the subjects that we are studying, which eventually leads us to the research gaps that we can carry out in our own research. Now that you have so many literature being reviewed, there are quite a number of informations. Different articles give you different findings. Their scopes and methodology may also be different. There are so many varieties in terms of the publications, and it will be quite a challenge for you to memorize all the important points. This is normally the area where a typical researcher finds themselves to be confused and out of the directions. There are too many informations to be processed, and you are unable to recall all these important points. Even though you can recall those important points, you may not be able to effectively identify where this point came out from. Even though you are able to identify where the points came out from, you might not be able to systematically put them together and make direct comparisons and gain a thorough picture of the entire subjects that you are studying. For this reason, you will find yourself spending so much time and very little outcome that you can acquire from reading so many publications and articles. Then you get disheartened and give up the searching process for the literature, and you decided to proceed with your research anyway. Without adequate literature review, you will find yourself having difficulties in understanding the subjects that you are studying, as well as discussing the findings and the results as obtained from your study. And this will lead to situations where your supervisors and your examiner finding your thesis to be lacking of technical insights, and their typical comments to you are you do not have sufficient readings and not having adequate understanding on the subject matters. This discourages you further, and you will realize that conducting a research to be quite challenging, and you don't know how you can improve from here. I guess this is a typical problem for a research student, and the root cause of this, it will be how do you effectively doing a summaries of findings out of so many articles that you have read. If you can effectively take in notes, organize the informations for you to summarize all the findings of all the relevant papers that you have read, and then by analyzing the summarized note that you have made, it will be easier for you to identify the missing links and the challenge of the open problem, which is known as the research gap. There are two things that you need to do. The first thing is you will need to know the purpose of conducting the review. The entire process here is actually seeking for answers. You must set the purpose before you start reading. What will you want to know from the article? What kind of information that you required? With a clear purpose, your reading becomes active. You are not so heavily guided by the articles. In fact, now you are looking for the answers from the articles. It is like interviewing the articles, and you will need to position yourself to dialogue with it. That will be my first point. You will need to take the leading roles throughout the entire reading process, rather than passively being guided by the text in the articles. And as you read more and more papers, due to the varieties among the papers, you will find yourself to be confused and lost. Therefore, you must always put your purpose in front of everything and seeking answers from all the references. And bear in mind that you may require to read the same papers for several times when you are looking for different answers. As your focus of interest may be different, you might need to come back to the same papers, looking into the other focus that you are interested of, in order for you to seek for new answers. And then the second things which you need to do is to make an effective notes for you to summarize all the findings that you acquire from different papers. The idea here is you will need to make parallel comparisons among the papers, and you will need to make the notes easily traceable, and the notes needs to be as concise as possible, which can be understood by yourself, as you will need to refer to the notes later, probably sometimes later, without requiring to go back and search for the relevant publications. The notes should be comprehensible to you and help you to quickly recall that what you have read in the previous articles, and help you to gain a better pictures of the entire subjects that you are studying. Only then, by comparing them parallelly, you can quickly identify the research gap. There are various ways that you can make this kind of notes, which different person may do it differently, as long as it can help you to quickly grasp whatever is necessary. Therefore, there is no standard rules how you're going to make the notes. This is examples how you can do the notes for the research gap. A table can be quite useful for you to make parallel comparisons, and you can develop this kind of table along with the papers that you have read. The table might expand as you read more papers. How you're going to organize the tables, it is very much dependent on your needs. One of the example here is you can first define the scopes. If necessary, you can even break down into subscopes, and then you can do some mappings between different papers. You may use the proper citations methods with the help of the citation software for you to work out the relevant mappings. Through the mappings, let's say you will need to identify the source of the scopes which you can recall and find the importance by referring to the table here. Let's say the scope now is subscope B. You can quickly identify where are the sources of the information. The number of scope as well as the numbers of publications may increase as you read more papers. This helps you to organize the informations in a very concise manner and allows you to be able to trace those informations when it is needed. You may also encounter a situations where there are certain scope of study or certain findings which you are not sure Is it going to be useful for your research? Or is it relevant to your research? Which at the stage of reading you are not sure. You may choose to put those into the table first, and then later, after you have complete establishing the tables, you will go back and review all the relevant informations in the tables and make necessary adjustment, whether to keep or to remove the relevant point, scopes or findings of the papers. Now that you have completed all the necessary informations, out of so many papers that you have read, you may find the tables to become extremely big. It doesn't matter actually, as long as you can manage to see the entire pictures of the scope of the study. There might be some rearrangement in terms of the sequence of the points, groupings, or separations. This is the stage where you reorganize everything in the table for better presentations for yourself, which you find it to be appropriate. Some choose to group them and arrange them in the chronological orders. Some might arrange them in terms of the relevancy or the significance of the relevant studies. It is totally up to you, which you find it to be most helpful for you to grasp the entire pictures of the subject being studied. From there, you can make parallel comparisons among different papers, and you may also identify certain scopes that which is more popularly being studied. You might want to ask yourself why it is so. Are they more significant? Are the scopes to be critical and must be studied when you want to study the topic? You might also observe some scopes to be quite unpopularly studied. You might want to ask yourself why is it so? Is it due to the limitations of certain studies? Or is it actually not really significant? It could also due to the limited understanding of the entire research industry, or it could be due to the limitations of the methodology. You might want to put all the relevant scope of study together pieces by pieces, finding their interrelation. All this can help you to identify the research gap in the field, and also to help you to decide the scope that you intend to study for your own research. So what you see here, in order to prevent yourself to be lost, drowning in all these publications, confused and not knowing what is the directions of your research, first you will need to take the leading roles during the reading. That will be active readings. You have to ask yourself the questions or the purpose of doing this kind of search, and then seek answers from the articles that you have on hand. Next, you will need to systematically arrange the informations in tables, make them easily traceable from different articles. The notes made here can be in the general point of view or more specified point of view. The table may seem to be quite messy in the early stage, which is okay, because at this stage you are constructing the tables and gathering all the relevant informations. And then when you reach to the point of saturation, you will start looking into the table themselves and making some organizations which involve rearranging, regrouping, and also deletions of those which is irrelevant. And then finally, you will have to analyze the information presented in the table in order to acquire the research grade and also to determine the focus and the scope that you intend to study for your own research. I hope this method can help you more in doing the effective search and also establishing the fundamental knowledge related to the topics that you are studying. Personally, I find this useful to me, and I always encourage my students to do so. On top of this, you need to know that this entire process may be quite slow, which you require patience to build out the table step by steps. You may find the process to be slow, but it is effective. Of course, this is one of the techniques that can help you to quickly identify the research gap, which at the same time build up your fundamental knowledge on the topics that you are studying. There could be some other techniques to help you. Regardless what kind of the techniques, I believe the characteristics that you have from this kind of techniques, it will be quite identical. Something which is for sure, you will require some systematic techniques to help you with this effective search. And I observe most of the students, they are lost and confused. One of the main reasons is they just read without making any notes to organize their informations. If you are unaware of any other techniques, maybe you can try this first, and then along the way, you may come up another better methods for you to organize the informations. Then you can modify based on your needs, whichever is helpful to you.